I should have ridden past that child in the snow, but God knows I'd already buried too many promises. I thought saving her would heal one ghost, never knowing it would wake another. Wade Harlan found the girl half frozen on a freight car floor, a paper pinned to her coat reading, "No one's child." But the moment she hummed that broken lullaby, the same tune her mother sang the night she died, he felt the past snap open like a trap. In 60 days, the county would seize his land, the railroad would swallow the valley, and a man wearing a lawman's badge would confess to poisoning the only woman Wade ever loved, all to erase the lineage that child carried in her blood. She clutched his coat and whispered, "Home," though she'd never seen it. And the strange part, the note on her chest was written in a hand Wade didn't recognize. If you want the full story, subscribe, watch this to the end, and tell me what city you're watching from. The child should have died in that boxcar long before the train reached Harlan Depot. Every mile of frozen track shook her small body. Every gust through the rotten boards stole another breath. And still, somehow, she clung to life, curled tight beneath a burlap sack, a scrap of paper pinned cruelly to her chest. No one's child. Lord help us. No child deserves to wake to those words. Snow lashed sideways as the freight screeched into the station, drowning the platform in steam. Ranchers swore, porters hurried, cattle bawled at the cold. None of them saw the girl. None of them heard the rasping cough that scraped out of her throat like a blade dragged over stone. But Wade Harlan did. He'd just dropped from the cattle car, boots striking wood with a tired certainty. Feed money weighed his coat. December weighed his bones. He meant to walk home, warm the stove, pray the storm would pass before Christmas Eve. Instead, the wind shifted, and he heard her. A cough, thin, desperate. A sound meant for no ears but heaven's. I remember thinking, that wasn't a sound meant to be ignored. Wade froze mid-stride. The station agent hollered about his cargo, but Wade was already moving, boots cutting a path through the drifts toward the iced-over boxcar at the end of the line. Frost rhymed its door, chains locked tight, metal groaning under winter's grip. Another cough, weaker this time. He set his shoulder beneath the iron hasp and shoved. The chain screamed. Ice broke loose in a spray of white shards. The door lurched open 3 inches, then a foot, just enough for him to slip inside. Cold swallowed him whole. His breath fogged before his eyes. Straw crunched under his boots. The dark was thick, still, waiting, until his sight caught the small, shaking bundle wedged beside a crate. Her. A girl no older than 7, shawl stiff with ice, hair frosted white at the ends. Lips blue, hands curled in the instinctive shape of a prayer she was too weak to finish. And on her chest, that paper Wade knelt, beside her, the boards biting his knee. She stirred when his shadow fell over her, a whimper rising and failing in her throat. One trembling hand tried to cover the paper pinned there, as if ashamed of it. He tugged the note free. No one's child. The letters looked carved, not written, like someone wanted the cruelty to last. Wade's jaw locked. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Snow hammered the boxcar roof like God himself pounding for attention. Then he stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped the child in it, lifting her carefully, as if any sudden move might end what little breath she had left. Outside, wind and steam collided in a white roar. "Sir!" the station agent shouted, stumbling toward him. "You can't remove an unregistered minor. County procedures. Stand clear," Wade said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the storm. People turned. A woman gasped. A ranch hand removed his hat without knowing why. The tall man from the northern range was walking straight through the square with a half-frozen child in his arms and no coat on his back. The girl's lashes fluttered. She coughed, a sharp, tearing sound, and her small fingers latched weakly onto Wade's shirt. "She came in on the west line," the agent insisted, scrambling beside him. "If she's abandoned, the judge'll need to place her. There's law, Mr. Harlan." "Law can wait," he said. "Breath can't." He crossed the street toward the clinic, boots hammering frost-slick boards. Church bells tolled the quarter hour, muffled by storm and distance. But the sound bent Wade's shoulders in a way no man noticed. Christmas was days away, and yet here he was, carrying a child branded unwanted, praying with every step that he wasn't too late. The clinic door stuck in the frame. He hit it with his shoulder and forced it open. "Doc!" Wade barked. "Up!" The doctor jolted from a chair by the stove, spectacles askew. "Good Lord, Wade! Who?" "No one's." The words scraped out before Wade could stop them. "Fix her!" Doc Porter moved fast. Blankets, stove, warm stones, a basin for thawing frozen hands. Wade laid the girl on the narrow bed, his coat still around her. The heat from the stove washed over her face. She twitched, eyelids shivering like trapped wings. "Easy, little one," the doctor murmured. "Stay with us. It's Advent. The Lord's still listening." She made a faint sound, half a sigh, half a cry, and her fingers reached blindly again. Wade caught them without thinking, his calloused hand swallowing hers. For the first time, her eyes opened, gray, soft, too old for their small frame. They fixed on him like she recognized something he didn't know he still carried. I felt that look, cut deeper than a bullet ever could. Doc pressed a warm stone into Wade's free hand. "Hold it to her feet. Slow warming. Don't let her slip." Wade nodded. Snow melted off his hat brim and pattered to the floor. Outside, the bells tolled again, slow, steady, like a heartbeat refusing to quit. Inside, Wade dug the crumpled scrap of paper from his fist and pushed it deep into his coat pocket. Not to forget, to remember. "Not tonight, Lord," he whispered. "Not her." The stove cracked as another log split in the heat, sending sparks drifting through the dim clinic. Doc Porter worked with the quick, narrow focus of a man who had buried more than he'd saved. He pressed warm cloths along the girl's arms, whispered stubborn encouragements, checked her pulse, checked it again. Wade stood anchored beside the bed, holding the warm stone to her frozen feet. Her small fingers still hooked weakly around one edge of his glove. Snowmelt ran off his coat in steady drops. The storm outside battered the window like it aimed to claw its way in. "She'll live," Doc finally muttered, "if the good Lord wants her to." Wade kept his eyes on the girl. "And if he doesn't?" Doc didn't answer. He just reached for more blankets. The child trembled once, sharp, involuntary. Then her breath steadied, shallow but certain. Her eyelids fluttered again. She looked up at the ceiling, then turned her face toward Wade's coat, like she needed its weight to pin her to the world. A small sound escaped her. Not a word. More like a plea. "I've heard that sound before. Years back. on a field I don't talk about. Doc tapped Wade's elbow. You found her in a freight car, abandoned, no escort, no ticket, no record. That's a storm bigger than this one. Wade didn't move. Storms pass. Not this kind. Doc drew in a breath. County law's clear. Any orphan brought in without documented kin goes straight through the judge. Temporary custody, 60 days. Wade's head lifted slowly. 60. Doc nodded. If no one claims her by then, she'll go to county placement. Or state. Depends who argues harder. The bell outside tolled again, rolling through the storm like some old warning from heaven. The girl shifted, a tiny motion that sent a thread of pain across her face. Her hand tightened on Wade's glove for half a heartbeat, then loosened again, as if she feared he'd pull away. I don't know her name, Doc said. Do you? Wade hesitated. The truth was sharp as the wind. He didn't. All he had was a scrap of paper with cruelty carved across it. But the girl opened her eyes then, wide, gray, uncertain, and looked at him like she expected him to speak, like she would believe whatever he said because she had nothing else left to believe in. No, Wade answered. Not yet. Doc sighed, rubbing his temples. I'll send word to the sheriff and the judge. They'll start their questions soon. And their procedures, Wade said. Doc shot him a look. And don't you fight 'em, Wade. I know that jaw of yours. County law's a lion. You poke it, it bites. Wade didn't respond. His gaze didn't budge from the girl. The coat around her shifted as she breathed, each rise a fragile victory. A knock rattled the clinic door. Doc stiffened. Snow's too thick for visitors. The door creaked open anyway, and the station agent squeezed inside, stamping snow from his boots, face flushed with urgency. Mr. Harlan, he began, breath puffing white. The sheriff's coming. Someone telegraphed ahead. Judge Cole was already expecting trouble off that freight line. Trouble? Doc snapped. It's a child. That's exactly the trouble, the agent said. Word is, Westline boxcar's been used by smugglers moving folks they don't want traced. Judge'll see this as evidence, or leverage, or both. Wade's shoulders squared, the old outlaw posture rising like a wolf through snow. She's not evidence. County might think otherwise, the agent replied. And Mr. Harlan, they'll ask why you removed her without registering custody. Doc swore softly. The girl coughed, thin, scraping, and Wade instinctively leaned in, steadying her blanket, lifting her head enough for air to travel easier. Her fingers reached again, brushing the side of his vest. Trusting him. Choosing him. That, right there. That was the part that hurt. Doc lowered his voice. If you mean to keep her safe, Wade, you'd best be ready. Law doesn't bend for Christmas. And Judge Cole, he remembers what you used to be. I remember too, Wade said quietly. Every day. The door banged open again, wind roaring inside like the breath of something ancient. Sheriff Alden stepped through, hat low, snow crusting his beard. Evening, Wade, he said. We've got a situation. No, Wade answered, rising. You've got paperwork. I've got a child. The sheriff let out a long breath. Judge Cole wants her transported to county holding. Tonight. Doc slammed a hand on his desk. She won't survive the trip. Judge didn't ask if she'd survive, the sheriff said. Wade looked down at the girl. Her eyes, barely open, barely aware, rested on his face with that same faint certainty. Like she already knew who he was to her. Like she'd chosen before he had the chance to refuse. I should have walked away. God knows it. Instead, Wade slid one arm beneath her, lifting her slow, steady, careful. The sheriff tensed. The station agent looked anywhere but at them. Doc whispered a prayer under his breath. Wade stood tall, coatless, snow in his hair, the child pressed to his chest. "You tell Judge Cole," he said, voice low as a coming storm. "He can make his decision after she lives long enough to hear it." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "That a threat, Wade?" "No," Wade said. "It's Christmas." Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the girl breathed. Just once, just enough. Like a candle flickering back from the edge of dark. And the clock for 60 days began to tick. The wind had eased by the time Wade pushed his front door open, but the cold inside carried its own kind of bite. An older, settled silence. The kind a man learns to live with when there's no one left to fill his rooms. He stepped aside so Doc could lay the girl on the spare cot beside the stone stove. The blankets swallowed her small frame. Her breath fogged faintly in the air. Mara followed behind them, shaking snow from her shawl, her face pale from the long ride. She didn't waste words, didn't offer comfort. She simply crossed to the windows and unlatched every one, sending stale air rushing out into the night. Wade moved to the hearth, feeding kindling into the stove with quiet urgency. Heat answered in slow, grudging waves. "She needs steady warmth," Doc muttered, checking her pulse again. "And the good Lord's mercy." Wade lifted his eyes to the rafters. "I've asked for that before." The ceiling never answered. The girl stirred, a tiny motion under the blankets. Her hand, a sliver of bone wrapped in skin, rose shakily toward Wade's coat still slung over the chair. She didn't speak, but the gesture was clear. She wanted the weight, the warmth, the scent of the man who'd carried her through the storm. Mara noticed. Without a word, she picked up the coat and laid it across the girl's chest, tucking the edges in like she'd done this 1,000 times for children who weren't hers. Then she stepped back into shadow, hiding the look that crossed her face. Doc adjusted the girl's bandages, then gathered his bag. "I'll check on her come morning," he said. "If anything changes, send for me." He hesitated at the door. "Wade, the judge won't wait long. I'm not handing her over tonight." Doc nodded once, heavy with a truth neither of them said aloud. Tonight may be all she has. When he left, the house fell into that old silence again. But it wasn't empty now, not with the faint sound of her breathing, not with the soft creak of the cot as she shifted like she feared being forgotten. Mara removed her gloves, warming her hands over the stove. "She held on to you the whole ride back," she said quietly. "She was cold," Wade answered. "That wasn't it." He didn't respond. He didn't trust his voice. The girl's eyelids fluttered open then, gray, unguarded, full of something far older than her years. She stared at the stove flame, and from somewhere deep in her throat came a thin, wavering hum. 3 notes, soft, uncertain. Mara's head snapped toward Wade. "Did you hear that?" Wade froze. The sound cut through him like a nail through old wood. The child hummed again, barely a breath, but the melody carried a shape he knew by heart. Because once, long ago, a woman with dark hair had sung that same tune over a cradle in this very room. Lord, don't do this to me again. Wade knelt beside the cot. Easy, he murmured. You're safe now. Her eyes drifted toward Tsatson, him, wide with trust no man deserved. The hum died into a shallow sigh. She reached for him weakly, fingers brushing the collar of his shirt, as if anchoring herself to the only solid thing in the room. Mara watched them both like someone witnessing a story she wasn't sure she belonged in. She knows you, Mara whispered. No, Wade said. She just needs someone close. Children don't hum songs they don't know. Wade rose too fast, the chair creaking behind him. He paced once, twice, the floor groaning under his boots. The girl's breathing hitched at the sudden movement. He forced himself still. I'll start the fire in the back room, he muttered. Keep the cold from creeping through the walls. But he didn't move toward the door. His hand hovered over the mantel instead, touching the edge of a framed photograph turned face down years ago. He stopped himself from lifting it. Not tonight. Not yet. Mara stepped beside him, her voice low. Wade, the judge will come with papers. Sheriff can only stall so much. If the county marks her as unclaimed, they'll take her before sunrise. She's not unclaimed, Wade said. You don't have proof. I brought her home. Mara looked at him then, really looked, and her breath left her like she'd been struck with a truth she didn't want. Across the room, the girl shifted again. She pushed one tiny foot from under the blanket, reaching for the stove's warmth. Mara hurried to cover it. Wade beat her there, his big hand tucking the fabric gently around the child's ankle. The girl relaxed instantly. Mara whispered, She listens to your hands, not your words. Wade swallowed hard. I shouldn't be the one she trusts. Maybe that's why she does. Outside, the storm dwindled into a hush. Snow fell softer now, settling over the fields like fresh linen over an unmarked grave. The stove crackled. The girl breathed. Wade stood guard beside her cot, the weight of Christmas night pressing around him. Mara lit a lantern and placed it on the windowsill, a quiet signal to any rider passing through the dark that a sick child lay inside. You think the Lord led her to your path on accident? She asked. Wade didn't answer. He couldn't. Not without breaking something in himself he'd spent years bracing shut. The child curled toward the coat again, murmuring one faint word, barely shaped, barely sound. Home. It struck Wade harder than any bullet ever had. Mara covered her mouth. Tears glimmered where firelight touched them. Wade felt the ache rise, old and merciless. God help me. I can't lose another one. The lantern flickered. The cot creaked. And somewhere in the icy dark beyond the window, a telegraph wire hummed, carrying a message neither of them yet knew would change everything. Dawn hadn't broken yet when hooves thundered across Wade Harlan's yard, too many for any honest visit. Mara was already at the window, her breath fogging the glass. Wade, she whispered. They're here. He stepped onto the porch before they could pound the door. 3 riders, 1 lantern, and a man in a dark wool coat dismounting with the stiffness of someone who believed the law bent toward him naturally. Mr. Harlan? The man asked, though he clearly already knew. Wade didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. The man flipped open a leather folio, the paper crackling like dry bone. Under county statute concerning unclaimed minors, a child found without parentage must be transferred to the custody of this office within. Mara moved behind Wade, just inside the doorway, one hand braced against the frame as though holding back the entire world. 60 days, the man continued. Proof of relation, proof of lineage, proof of rightful claim. Without it, the child becomes property of the county, and any land housing said minor becomes subject to review for succession. Wade stared at him. You're telling me if she stays under my roof, you can take my land? The man smiled without moving his eyes. I'm telling you, the law takes what isn't lawfully held. A gust of cold swept across the yard. The girl coughed inside, soft, but the sound carried enough to make the nearest deputy shift his boots. She's ill, Mara said sharply. You'll not barge in and frighten her. No one intends to frighten anyone, the official replied. This is routine procedure, ma'am. Wade stepped forward, blocking the doorway. You're not coming inside. One deputy reached for the step. Wade's stare stopped him mid-stride. I'll return tomorrow, the official said. You'll sign the initial declaration then. 60 days, Mr. Harlan. Not a day more. He tapped the folio shut. For the child's sake, let's hope the good Lord grants you answers. Quickly. Lord, I've walked this road before, Wade thought, a brief sting ripping through him. And it near buried me then. The riders turned away, hooves chewing the frost as they left the homestead behind. Only when they shrank into the trees did Mara finally exhale. They knew, she said. They knew we brought her here. Wade closed the door, the latch clicking like the first tick of a clock counting toward ruin. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Not with the child's cough echoing faintly down the hall. Mara spread the documents across the table. Wade, they'll take her. No, he said. You don't have papers, no baptism record, no guardian claim. No, I said no. Something in his voice made her fall silent. After a moment, she steadied herself, rolling her sleeves as if preparing for battle. Then we need to start tonight. She circled the table, organizing the papers into piles, marking sections with pieces of twine. Wade watched her work, methodical, decisive, unafraid of the bureaucracy that made other folks tremble. What are you doing? He asked. Mapping the law, she said. Every door they try to close will pry open another. Wade shook his head. There's no prying with men like that. There is if the sheriff stands with us. Wade considered it, jaw clenched. Then he reached for his coat. Stay with her. I'll ride to town. Mara caught his arm before he reached the door. Wade, listen to me. If they claim she's no one's child, then every step you take now has to be by the book. If you draw a weapon, if you make a threat. I'm not drawing anything, he muttered. She searched his face for truth. He let her look. A soft whimper drifted from the back room. Mara went to check on the girl, leaving Wade momentarily alone in the half-lit cabin. He stared at the scattered legal documents, the ink heavy with threat. 60 days, as if grief had ever honored a deadline. The girl murmured something, one faint word reaching his ears through the hall. He couldn't make it out, but it sent a tremor through his ribs. Mara reappeared, adjusting her shawl. She asked if you'd come back. Wade swallowed, throat thick. I never promised anything I didn't bleed for. He opened the door. The cold morning hit him like a warning. I'll be back before sundown, he said. You'd better, Mara replied, her voice thin but steady, because they won't wait for sundown to decide what she's worth. Wade stepped onto the frost-hardened ground, boots crunching like brittle glass. Behind him, the child coughed again. Small, fragile, a sound that felt too close to a plea. The sun had not yet risen, but the day had already turned against them. And somewhere down the ridge, as Wade swung into the saddle, the telegraph lines whispered, an electric murmur carrying news to men who would kill a family before they ever let one form. The town was waking when Wade Harlan reached the sheriff's office. Lamps flickering in frosted windows, a church bell testing its first hesitant tolls. He tied off his horse and stepped inside. Sheriff Owen Price stood over a pot of bitter coffee, reading a telegram with a frown carved deep into his brow. He didn't look up. You're early, Harlan. I didn't sleep. Figured as much. The sheriff folded the telegram, sliding it into a drawer like a man burying ammunition he hoped he'd never need. What brings you? Wade laid the county document on the desk. The sheriff studied it long enough for the tension to thicken. They sent Creed after you, he said quietly. Is that his name? For now. Owen tapped the page. The railroad's been circling your acreage for months. Every homestead marked unclaimed goes straight into their pocket. Families get scattered. Some never show up in church again. Wade's jaw tightened. They won't have her. That depends on your proof. The sheriff leaned back. And on whether you keep that temper of yours in check. Wade met his stare. I'm not the man I was. The sheriff snorted softly. You don't have to be. They just need you to slip once. One threat, one drawn gun, one loud moment. And this whole thing turns against you. I know what slipping costs. God help me, I know it too well. What about Creed? Wade asked. He's new to this jurisdiction, but every land seizure the last 6 months has his signature on it. Same clause, same timing, same company buying the lots afterward. Railroad. Railroad, the sheriff confirmed. And they'll drown you in paper long before they spill a drop of blood. Wade exhaled sharply. Doc says she's got a chance. If she rests. If we keep her warm. Paper won't give you time for that, Owen replied. You'll need evidence. Clean, hard evidence. Something even a corrupted judge won't ignore. What kind? A ledger. A telegram trail. Anything that ties Creed to the railroad holdings. The sheriff pulled out the drawer again and slid the earlier telegram toward Wade. This came through before dawn, mentions an expansion corridor, and your land sits dead center. Wade didn't curse. He didn't need to. The truth weighed enough. Go home, the sheriff said. Stay quiet. I'll sniff around, see what I can find. But Wade wasn't listening anymore. Not fully. Because somewhere far beyond these walls, he could almost hear the girl's weak breath, the soft hum she'd made when the stove's warmth first reached her bones. She held on to me, he thought, and I can't let her fall again. He tipped his hat and left. Back at the homestead, snow melted along the window panes where the stove heat fought back the winter. Mara had turned the kitchen into a silent workshop. Papers spread across the table, twine marking sections like battlefield, trenches. The girl sat bundled in blankets near the hearth, fighting sleep with that determined stubbornness only sick children possess. Her small hand clutched Wade's old glove, knuckles white around the worn leather. "She woke asking for you," Mara said without looking up. "Wouldn't drink until I told her you'd be back." Wade knelt beside the child. "Little one," he murmured, "you listen to Mara. She knows more than I do." The girl blinked at him, gray eyes swirling with a trust he hadn't earned. She raised one finger, one slow, trembling gesture toward the saddlebag he'd dropped by the door. He didn't understand at first. Then she hummed 3 soft notes, counting. Mara paused. "She wants to help." "No," Wade said. "She needs to rest. Rest won't help if they take her." The girl whispered, barely sound. "Home." Wade's chest tightened. "You're safe here." Mara rose, moving with purpose. She gathered a strip of leather, a dull awl, a needle, setting them on the table like pieces of a ritual. "She needs to be seen doing work of the homestead," Mara said. "Stitching, branding prep, anything that shows she's part of this land. It supports your claim." "She's too weak." "Then she does 3 stitches," Mara answered. "Not 4, just 3. Wade hesitated. The girl didn't. She pushed the blanket down and stretched her hand toward the needle. "Lord, don't make me watch this child fight alone." He lifted her gently, guiding her to the table. Mara steadied the leather. The girl pinched the needle between 2 trembling fingers. "Count them," Wade said softly. She nodded. 1. The needle pierced the leather. 2. Her breath shook. Mara steadied her elbow. 3. She let out a small, tired sound, somewhere between triumph and surrender. Wade caught her hand before it slipped. Mara tied the thread neatly. "There. Something real. Something they can't claim is forged." The girl sagged against Wade's chest, exhausted but proud. Her breathing steadied. She clung to his shirt, refusing to be set down. Mara's voice softened. "You see? Even the smallest hands can make a family harder to destroy." Wade looked down at the stitches, crooked, weak, imperfect, and irrefutable. He felt something shift in him, old rust breaking loose. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the shutters like fingers impatient for the next blow. And down the ridge, the telegraph wires thrummed with news neither of them yet knew. News that would take every path they hoped for and set it aflame. Snow had settled into a steady whisper by the time Mara stepped outside to fetch water. The yard lay calm, too calm, like a held breath before a scream. She paused. Something on the porch railing caught her eye. A letter. No seal. No name. Her stomach dropped. She tore it open with cold fingers. 4 words stared back at her in hard black ink. "Remove the child tonight." Beneath it, another line, crueler for its precision. "We know what you took." Mara's heartbeat stumbled. She looked toward the window where the girl slept, her small head resting against Wade's worn quilt. The child murmured faintly, unaware that the world outside was sharpening its teeth for her. Mara stepped back inside, shutting the door quietly. "Wade." He was at the table oiling a hinge, tools laid out like a soldier's kit. He didn't look up. "What now?" She handed him the note. Wade read it once, then again. His jaw locked so tight the muscles trembled. "Who dropped this?" "No tracks," Mara whispered. "Just the letter." "Lord, I've buried too many threats. Don't make me bury another." Wade crossed the room in 3 heavy strides, threw open the storage door, then stopped. Papers were scattered across the floor like winter leaves. The small lockbox he'd kept tucked behind spare blankets lay bent open, hinges twisted. The charred edge of his marriage certificate, once carefully preserved, was gone. "Mara," he said, voice low. Someone broke in. She knelt by the scattered papers. "They only took the ones linking you to her mother." "That's the point," Wade muttered. "Take away proof. Take away claim." A sudden smell curled through the air. Sharp, acrid, wrong. Mara spun toward the back door. "Do you smell?" Wade was already moving. He burst outside, snow spraying from his boots. Smoke bled from the lean-to where he kept leftover feed and a locked crate of old correspondence. He wrenched the door open. Heat slapped him in the face. Embers hissed and spat, eating through the remnants of paper stored there. Wade grabbed a bucket, scooped snow, and threw it on the flames until the fire choked out. Ash drifted from his hands like blackened snowflakes. "Everything in here's gone," he said, voice flat. Mara knelt beside him, lifting a half-burned page, just enough remaining to read the word certificate. She closed her eyes. "Wade, this was deliberate." Before he could answer, hoofbeats thundered again, this time only one rider. Doc? Sheriff? No. The rhythm was wrong. Too steady. Too certain. Judge Wainwright's clerk dismounted, stamping snow off his boots. He carried a crisp envelope, seal unbroken, confidence radiating from him like steam from a forge. "I've got orders from the bench," the clerk announced. Wade stepped forward. "At this hour?" "When the county's interest is at stake, time is flexible." The clerk handed over the envelope. "Effective immediately, all homestead adoption rights, guardian pledges, and family claim ceremonies are suspended pending review." Mara's breath caught. Suspended? On what grounds? The clerk pretended sympathy. "Unusual circumstances." Wade tore open the envelope. The judge's script marched across the page, cold and detached. No branding ceremony, no family rights, no legal permanence. Not until the county completes its investigation. He felt something inside him drop. Silent, deep, like a beam cracking in a dark mine. Mara stepped closer. "Without the ceremony, we can't prove she belongs here." "That's the idea," the clerk replied smoothly. 60 days. If you fail to provide lineage, the child moves to county lodging. Land to be reassessed. Nothing personal." He tipped his hat. "Good evening." He left the yard as if he'd just delivered a polite invitation to supper. Wade stared after him, fists clenched at his sides. Snow swirled around him, catching in his hair, settling on his shoulders like the weight of every failure he'd ever tried to outrun. Mara approached him slowly. "Wade, they're closing every door. They won't get the last one." "What door is that?" "The truth." She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her face had changed, held something painful. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. Wade turned. "Now?" "Yes. Before this goes any further." Mara reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded slip of paper, its edges worn from years of hiding. "I signed this 2 winters ago." A silence agreement. "They offered payment to keep my boarding house open when the storms wiped out business." Her voice thinned. I didn't know where the money came from. I didn't ask. Wade felt the world tilt for a moment. Not because of betrayal, but because she said it now, when telling the truth could bury her. You should have told me. I'm telling you now, she said. Because if we're to fight this, we fight it clean. Every piece on the table. Wade ran a hand over his face. I've stood in darker corners. I won't leave her in one. He pocketed the slip. This doesn't change what we do next. Mara studied him, disbelief flickering into relief. Before either could speak again, a soft cry drifted from inside. A thin, frightened sound. The girl had woken. She'd heard something. She'd felt something. Wade's breath caught. Mara, keep her close. Don't let her see the burn. Mara moved quickly, slipping back inside. Wade remained outside, staring at the embers glowing faintly in the snow. Someone wanted every proof of family turned to ash. Someone wanted the girl back in the cold she'd barely survived. And from the ridge above, the telegraph wire hummed again. Longer this time, almost like a warning. Night swallowed the town in a black hush by the time Wade Harlan tied off his horse behind the courthouse. Snowflakes drifted like drifting ash, too soft, too innocent for the work he'd come to do. He checked the alley. Empty. A single lantern burned behind the frosted windows of the clerk's office, but the rest of the building slept under winter's heavy hand. Mara's map, hand-drawn from whispers, cleaning schedules, and the quiet gossip of widows, was tucked inside his coat. He didn't pull it out. He didn't need to. Her voice echoed in his mind. 4 steps from the judge's door, Wade. 2 creaks in the floorboard. Go slow. Lord, forgive the roads I still know how to walk. He slipped through the side window Mara had marked. His boots hit the wooden floor with the silence of a man who'd spent a lifetime learning how not to be heard. The courthouse smelled of ink and cold iron, law and punishment braided together. Wade crossed the hall. The dim moonlight from the high windows silvered the brass plaque. Jonas Creed, county officer. The name alone made his jaw clench. He tested the handle. Locked. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulling out the old pick he'd sworn he'd never use again. His hand hesitated in the air. Mara's right. They want me to slip. But the girl's hum, 3 fragile notes from earlier that afternoon, rose in his memory. He set the pick to the lock. It clicked open like a secret welcoming him back. He pushed inside. Creed's office was too neat. No mud on the boots by the door. No scattered papers. Just order. Cold, deliberate order. A stove ember glowed dull red, barely alive. Everything felt arranged to look innocent. Wade crossed to the large portrait hanging behind the desk. He hooked his fingers behind the frame, lifted. A safe. Steel. Heavy. Built for men with something wicked to hide. He knelt, tracing the edge with his thumb. If she had a name in here, if her mother's truth is in this box, I'll dig it out even if it kills me. He spun the dial, slow, measured, listening for the faintest catch. 1, 2, 3. A soft click answered him. The safe swung open. Inside lay rows of folders, bound telegrams, signed seizure orders, names of families Wade had known his whole life, reduced to ink and theft. And there, Beneath a ledger thick with numbers, a sealed envelope, marked Bennett. Wade's breath hitched. He tore it open. A birth record, a transfer recommendation, and a note scribbled in a sharp, hasty hand. Eliminate the possibility she reaches Harlan. The room swayed. The edges of Wade's vision darkened. They wanted her gone before she ever touched my hands, before her mother's truth could rise. He slipped the envelope inside his coat, then reached for the ledger. A metallic click froze him, a revolver cocking behind his skull. You never did know when to stay buried, Harlan. Wade rose slowly. Jonas Creed stood in the doorway, face half lit by lantern glow, smile tight as barbed wire. Turn around, Creed said. Wade didn't. You broke into my home, burned what you couldn't use. Creed laughed softly. That wasn't me, but I don't mind the outcome. You're holding a ledger that proves you stole from half this county. Ledger? Creed shrugged. I see a thief in my office holding evidence he planted himself. Sheriff won't question that. Judges won't question that. Railroad damn sure won't question that. His eyes gleamed. You made this easy. Wade could feel the heat of the barrel through his hair. Mara, little one, forgive me if this is where I fall. Creed stepped closer. You know, I wondered what would draw you out of that frozen patch you call a ranch. Turns out it was a child that isn't even yours. Wade's fists curled. She belongs with me. No, Creed whispered. She belongs nowhere. Then he leaned in, voice dripping poison. Just like her mother. Wade's pulse stuttered. What did you do? Oh, Harlan, you still don't see it? Creed's smile widened. You've been grieving a death that wasn't sickness at all. The words dropped into Wade's chest like a stone through ice. Creed straightened, savoring it. She was inconvenient, like the girl, like anyone who stands in the way of progress. Rage flared, not wild but cold, disciplined, a fire honed by years of trying to forget what he once was. He edged his hand toward the ledger. Don't bother, Creed said. You won't leave this room. A distant sound answered. Boots, heavy, purposeful. Creed turned his head, irritated. Who? The door burst inward. Sheriff Price swept in with 2 deputies, guns raised. Drop it, Creed. Creed stiffened. Sheriff, I said drop it. A second passed. Then the revolver clattered to the floor. Wade exhaled, the tight band around his chest finally loosening. Sheriff stepped between them, nudging Creed back with a practiced shove. You all right, Harlan? The sheriff asked. Wade picked up the ledger. No, but I've got what we need. Sheriff nodded. Then let's get you home. As they moved out, Creed spat after them, eyes burning with a promise Wade knew too well. This isn't over, Harlan. Wade didn't turn around. No, he thought, it isn't. But for the first time since the storm began, he carried proof stronger than fear. Ink, paper, and the truth no fire could fully erase. And somewhere beyond the courthouse walls, winter wind shifted direction, as if the night itself understood what line had just been crossed. Snow hammered the dark plains as Wade Harlan rode through the night, the ledger tucked beneath his coat like a living thing. Every hoofbeat struck the frozen earth with the impatience of a man racing a clock he could no longer see. I've been too late before, he thought. Lord, don't let me be too late again. Sheriff Price rode parallel but kept his distance, lantern hooded to avoid catching unwanted eyes. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the ridge, and the homestead rose ahead, its outline sharp against the moonlit snow. Something was wrong. The chimney was cold. No glow in the windows. No stirring shadows. Only darkness. Heavy. Unnatural. "Wade," the sheriff said, slowing his horse. "Hold up." But Wade was already off the saddle, boots slamming into the snow as he sprinted toward the door. It stood ajar, swaying on one hinge like a wounded limb. "Mara!" he shouted. No answer. He shoved inside. The kitchen was overturned, chairs scattered, papers shredded across the floor like someone had tried to erase every trace of belonging. The stove had died, its ashes gray and thin. "Mara!" he barked again. A faint groan answered from the hall. Wade tore toward the sound and stopped. Mara lay slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to a wound at her hairline. Blood dried in a dark ribbon down her cheek. She lifted her eyes, dazed, reaching toward him. "Wade, they took her." His stomach dropped like a stone thrown into a frozen well. The girl's blanket lay crumpled by the cot. Wade lifted it with trembling hands, his breath tightening. A second slip of paper, pinned where the child's small body should have been, fluttered loose. He unfolded it. "Bring the ledger to the ridge before sundown. Come alone, or she freezes for good this time." His hands shook only once, then went steady, far too steady for any ordinary man. Sheriff Price entered behind him, lantern casting long shadows across the ruined room. "Wade, talk to me. What happened?" Wade handed him the note. Sheriff's eyes hardened. "They're forcing a trade." "No," Wade said quietly. "They're forcing a burial." Mara tried to sit up. I couldn't stop them. They wore masks, knew the house. They went straight for her cradle." Her voice cracked. "She called for you before they dragged her out the door." The words hit harder than any bullet. Wade knelt beside her. "Easy now." Mara gripped his sleeve. "It's Creed. It has to be. He wants that evidence. He wants you blamed for whatever comes next." Wade rose slowly, the ledger tight in his fist. "Sheriff, take this." He thrust the ledger into Price's hands. The sheriff recoiled. "Wade, you can't ride out there empty. They'll kill you before you reach the ridge." "That's why you're taking it." Wade stepped closer. "If I fall, this can't fall with me." Sheriff swallowed. "I'll send deputies." "No." Wade's voice cut through the room like a blade through thawing ice. "They want me alone. But that doesn't mean I'll be unguarded." Mara strained to sit straighter. "Let me go with you." Wade shook his head. "You're hurt." "I can still walk." "You're staying," he said, but the words softened at the end. "She'll need you if she comes home." Mara's face crumpled, not in weakness, but in fury. "You think you're the only one who loves her?" Wade paused. Then gently, "No. That's why I need you breathing." The wind moaned through the broken door, scattering ash and cold across the floorboards. Snow gathered quickly, as if eager to bury whatever truth this home had held. Wade knelt once more beside the cot. His hand brushed the indentation the child had left behind. Small, warm hours ago, now empty. I carried you through one storm, he thought. I'll carry you through the next, even if it breaks me. Mara reached out, gripping his wrist with a sudden fierceness. Wade, before they hit me, I saw something. One of them dropped a matchstick. Railroad brand. They're using the line camps as hideouts. Then the ridge isn't just a meeting place, Wade murmured. It's the gate to what they've been building. Sheriff Price finished tying the ledger inside his saddlebag. I'll ride the back valley, gather who I trust. You get the girl, but don't you fire the first shot. They're waiting for that. Wade stepped out into the wind, pulling his coat tight. Sheriff, he said without turning, if I don't return by sunset, you will, Price cut in. Men like you don't fall easy. Wade exhaled, long and low. Men like me fall all the time, he thought. We just do it on our feet. He mounted his horse. Behind him, the house stood silent. Inside, Mara knelt by the cold stove, whispering a prayer over the torn blanket. And from far across the valley, beyond the timberline and the frozen creek, a faint echo rode the wind, half cry, half whimper. A child's voice, calling for someone who had already lost too much to lose her too. Wade kicked his horse forward, darkness swallowing him whole. The ridge waited, and so did the man who meant to end him. Morning light never fully reached the valley that day. It crawled instead, weak, diluted, as though even the sun hesitated to touch what the night had broken. Mara Whitlock stepped into that pale half-light, with a shawl tight around her shoulders, and a bruised temple throbbing beneath the cloth. She held no lantern, no badge of authority, only a list of names, hastily scrawled, pressed to her chest. Every house she approached had the same look. Curtains drawn, chimney smoke thin from rationed wood, families who had survived winter but not mercy. Her knock on the first door echoed like a plea. Widow Klein opened it, her eyes sinking at the sight of Mara's injury. Child, who did this to you? The same men who took her, Mara said. They're after Wade, too. Widow Klein stiffened. He stood for my boys when the railroad men tried to drive them out. You tell me what you need. Mara stepped inside and laid a page from Wade's ledger on the table. I don't need stories. I need truth. Will you testify to what they stole from you? The widow placed her palm on the worn KJV Bible beside the lamp. I'll stand. It began. House to house, mile to mile, Mara went, sometimes welcomed, sometimes feared, sometimes turned away with trembling hands, but always leaving behind that same stark choice. Stand or stay silent. By noon, a small cluster of townsfolk had followed her to the church steps. Some leaned on canes, some on anger, some on 20 years of loss that finally had a name. Mara faced them, breath clouding in the cold. They've taken a child, she said. And if they succeed, they'll take the land beneath your feet next. They have a man in a black coat to read the law to their liking, and a judge who signs whatever they slide across his desk. Murmurs rippled. Sheriff Price stepped forward from the shadows of the vestibule. She's right, he said, and this town won't survive another winter of permitted seizures. Not if we keep bowing our heads. He lifted Wade's ledger high enough for all to see. This book ties every false claim, every bribe, back to one man, Jonas Creed. He's holding a child up there on the ridge, thinking Wade will trade the truth for her life. Mara's voice thinned, but held. We're not letting truth die today. A man in the back spat on the snow. Why should we help Harlan? He ain't helped us. Mara looked him square in the eye. Because he's doing what none of us dared, standing in the open. And because a child with no name and no defense is easier for Creed to kill than any of us. She let silence settle like frost. Then, if we don't defend the smallest among us, we don't deserve a town. One by one, heads bowed, hands tightened around Bibles, hats, rifles. The widow stepped forward again. What do you need, dear? A witness line, Mara said. At the church, at the sheriff's office, at the telegraph, at the Ridge. If Wade brings the girl home alive, we give testimony before any judge who will listen. And if he falls, her voice broke for half a heartbeat, we carry his truth the last mile. The sheriff nodded. We start here, now. Far from the church, in a cold stone shed perched above the ridge, the girl huddled against a stack of frozen feed sacks. Rope bound her wrists, loosely enough to imply mercy, but tight enough to deny hope. A guard, one of Creed's hired guns, paced near the door. You hear me, kid? He said, kneeling down. Your man ain't coming. No one's fool enough to trade their life for a nobody. The girl didn't cry. She just pressed her lips together and hummed 3 soft notes, the ones Wade had taught her to use when her breath was failing. The guard frowned. What's that supposed to be? A signal. A prayer. A memory. She slipped her fingers toward the wooden floor, scraping faint marks. Small lines, angled, repeating. Stars. The same little star-shaped birthmark behind her ear, drawn into the dust. She kept humming. The guard scowled and grabbed her arm. Stop that! She froze, then whispered one fragile lie. I'm nobody. Let me go. The gunman hesitated, thrown off by the surrender in her voice. He loosened his grip, and she slipped 1 foot forward, leaving another star in the dirt before he yanked her back. I'm still here, her eyes said. I'm still leaving a trail. At the church, the bell rang once, thin, uncertain. Mara turned sharply. Sheriff Price met her gaze. That's the signal, he said. The deputies saw dust overturned near the north slope. She's alive. Mara shut her eyes in brief, fierce relief. Then Wade has something to follow. The sheriff mounted his horse. I'll circle wide behind the ridge. Keep the witnesses ready. If Creed goes down, there'll be hell to sweep up. Mara's throat tightened. Sheriff, you'll watch his back? With everything I've got, he replied. He paused. And Miss Whitlock, you did right today. Mara didn't answer. Her gaze had drifted to the horizon, to the jagged spine of the ridge where a man she trusted more than she dared admit was riding straight into the lion's teeth. Bring her home, Wade, she thought. Bring yourself home, too. The bell rang again. The line of witnesses grew, and across the valley, the telegraph wire began to hum, long, steady, almost like the trembling breath of a town finally waking to its own courage. The ridge rose like the spine of some old beast, jagged and waiting. Snow whipped across its edges, slicing the air into needles. Wade Harlan rode straight for it, shoulders squared against the wind, each hoofbeat a drum calling him toward judgment. He dismounted at the narrow pass, breath fogging hard. The silence here wasn't natural, too tight, too deliberate. A trap with patience. I'm here, Wade called, voice carrying across the ravine. Bring her out! A shadow shifted behind a boulder, then another. 6 armed men emerged, rifles half raised, and last came Jonas Creed, holding the girl by one wrist. Not roughly. That would have been too honest. His grip was almost gentle, like a man presenting evidence in court. The girl's face was pale, lips cracked, rope still around her wrists, but her eyes were open, alert, searching. Wade lifted both hands, showing he came bare. Let her walk to me. Creed laughed softly. Oh, Mr. Harlan, you know the terms. Ledger for the child. One move out of line and she'll finish freezing where she started. Wade took a step forward. The nearest rifle clicked into place. Creed's smile deepened. That's far enough. Wade steadied his breathing. I've walked into death before, but never with a child watching me do it. He reached inside his coat, slow as winter thaw, and pulled out not the ledger, but a folded scrap of paper. Creed tensed. Wade held it between 2 fingers. You recognize this? Creed's eyes narrowed. What is it? A name, Wade said. The only one you missed when you burned my home. He unfolded it. The wind threatened to tear it from his hand, but he kept it firm. Her mother wrote it, Wade said. Wrote it after she met you. Wrote what she feared you'd do. She hid it where only someone who loved her would ever think to look. A flicker, just one, crossed Creed's face. Wade pressed. She knew your real name, didn't she? Eli Griggs, brother of the man who died on this ridge years ago. Creed stiffened. His men shifted uneasily. You want revenge, Wade said, voice hardening. But you don't want to earn it. You want the law to hand me to you like a gift. Creed stepped closer, dragging the girl with him. You took everything from my family, my brother, his land, his future. He fired first, Wade said, and you know it. History is written by whoever walks away, Creed hissed. Wade's jaw clenched. Let her go. Ledger, Creed snapped. Wade nodded once. Fine. He reached into his coat again. Creed's men raised rifles. The girl whimpered, shrinking from the cold steel at her side. But Wade didn't pull out the ledger. He pulled out empty hands. No, Wade said quietly. You'll get the truth before you get the paper. Creed snarled. You think I won't kill her right now? Wade lifted his chin. Not before you say it. Not before you tell the men behind you why. You poisoned her mother. The rifles wavered. Just a degree. Enough to show doubt had entered the ranks. Creed froze. Wade took a step forward, boots cracking through crusted snow. Say it, Eli. Say what you did. Say why her mother never came home. The wind hissed between rock faces, waiting. Creed shoved the girl aside and lunged for Wade with a knife drawn from his coat. Snow exploded beneath their boots as they collided. The blade flashed. Wade caught his wrist, twisting, muscles burning as they grappled near the edge. The world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Creed's breath was hot in Wade's ear. You don't deserve to know. Wade shoved him back, boots carving trenches in the frost. Creed stumbled, then, in a burst of rage, shouted the words Wade had been forcing toward daylight. She wouldn't sell. That woman wouldn't take the money, and she wouldn't give up the child. So yes, I made sure she never stood in our way again. The ridge went dead still. The girl cried out. The gunman faltered, rifles dipping. Wade surged forward, knocking the knife from Creed's hand. It skittered over the cliff, disappearing into the shadows below. Creed fell to his knees, gasping. Wade stood over him, one breath away from ending the man, ending the threat, ending the years of cold grief. I could end this right now, he thought. Lord help me, one blow and it's done. His fist tightened. But he didn't strike. He stepped back. You don't get to die clean, Wade said. You're going to face every soul you stole from, in the open, under oath. Creed lunged again, but a rifle cracked, not Wade's. Sheriff Price's shot tore through the air, knocking Creed's hand aside as he reached for Wade's throat. Deputies swarmed the ridge, emerging from snow-covered gullies where they'd waited unseen. Jonas Creed, the sheriff barked. You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping, attempted murder. Hell, the list's longer than a winter night. Creed screamed, but the deputies forced him down, shackles clamping over his wrists. Wade didn't watch the rest. He went to the girl. She was sitting in the snow, trembling but alive, rope still biting at her wrists. When she saw him, her breath hitched, and she whispered the smallest sound. Papa. Wade's chest broke open. He dropped to his knees and gathered her carefully, afraid she might shatter like the ice around them. I've got you, he murmured. Little one, I've got you. Her fingers clutched his coat, the same place they had the night he'd carried her home through the storm. Above them, the ridge wind moaned like something ancient had finally been set to rest. But Wade knew better. This isn't finished, he thought. The truth never ends on the mountain. It ends in the courthouse where every lie began. He held the child tighter, shielding her from the winter's bite. The sun began to crawl up the far horizon, thin light, catching the fresh snow, like grace trying to break through. Mara would be waiting. The town would be waiting. And the law, real law, would have to listen now. Wade rose with the girl in his arms. The walk home would be long, but he'd carried heavier burdens through colder nights. Sheriff Price didn't waste daylight. Creed was dragged down from the ridge in iron shackles, cursing into the wind while the deputies shoved him toward the waiting wagon. But Wade Harlan didn't hear him. Not really. His whole world was the child in his arms. Her small fingers knotted in his coat, like she feared he might vanish if she let go. Mara met them halfway down the trail, breath white in the biting air. The moment she saw the girl, alive, shivering, but alive, her knees nearly buckled. She reached out, touching the child's cheek with a reverence bordering on prayer. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God you brought her home. Wade swallowed, throat raw. I almost didn't. Lord knows I almost didn't. But there wasn't time to rest. Sheriff Price's voice cut in, sharp and urgent. Harlan, Creed confessed on the ridge. Enough for a rope, but we're not giving him that. We're giving the truth a bigger stage. He nodded at the saddlebag tied across his horse. The ledger, the telegrams, every rotten root Wade had unearthed. Territorial Judge Wainwright's been overruled. Circuit Judge Alden arrived on the morning train. He wants testimony, witnesses, and every scrap of evidence you and Mara dug up. Mara straightened, jaw tightening. Then let's show him how deep this rot goes. The courthouse swelled with bodies before noon. Farmers, widows, cowhands, displaced families clutching papers they'd kept hidden under floorboards. The girl sat wrapped in Wade's coat at the front bench, chin resting against his arm. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed every movement in the room, wide with something between fear and awakening. Judge Alden entered like a blade splitting the air. No friendliness, no theatrics, just authority, clean, hard, and long overdue. "Bring forth the accused," he said. Creed was dragged to the stand, wrists chained, face twisted with a fury he no longer bothered to hide. Behind him, a stack of seized documents towered like a monument to his crimes. Wade stepped forward when the judge called his name. He laid the burnt scrap of his marriage record on the table, then the birth note, then the ledger. Each piece landed with the weight of a hammer. "Mr. Harlan," Judge Alden said, "are you asserting guardianship of the child in question?" Wade looked at the little girl. She met his eyes, brave in a way no child should ever have to learn. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, "by duty, by labor, by blood that isn't mine but grace that is." Mara stepped beside him, placing her silence agreement slip onto the pile. Her voice didn't shake. "And I testify that Jonas Creed used the county seal to threaten families, seize land, and target this child to erase a witness." A murmur rippled across the benches. Widow Klein rose next, then two ranch hands, then the telegraph runner. One by one, stories spilled. Losses, threats, forged notices, missing deeds. A chorus of wounds the town had held too long. Judge Alden lifted a hand. Silence fell. "Given the evidence," he said, "the injunction on homestead ceremony is lifted. The branding rite will proceed immediately. This child is no longer unclaimed. She is under lawful protection of this household and this community." The girl's small hand tightened around Wade's sleeve. His breath caught. "Thank you, Lord. Just this once, thank you." The judge nodded toward the door. "Prepare the forge." And for the first time in years, Wade Harlan felt the ground under his feet steady. The forge behind the courthouse hissed to life as blacksmith Rowan pumped the bellows, sparks leaping like fireflies, desperate for warmth. Snow fell in slow, reverent flakes, muting the world, as if the whole territory had paused to bear witness. Wade Harlan stood beside the anvil, the girl wrapped in his coat, her cheek pressed to his chest. Mara hovered protectively at her side, one hand resting gently on the child's shoulder. Sheriff Price approached with a small iron brand, Wade's family mark, a simple crescent with a star tucked inside. "Heat's ready," he murmured. "You sure about this, Wade?" Wade looked down at the girl. She met his gaze, steady despite the bruise on her temple, despite the long night she had survived. "Little one," he whispered, "you don't have to do anything you fear." Her fingers curled tighter around his coat. "You said, home." The word struck him clean through. "Lord, help me be worthy of it." Wade nodded. "Then home it is." The iron glowed a deep, throbbing red as Rowan pulled it from the coals. Mara guided the small filly forward, a young horse Wade had raised but never named. The girl brushed its neck, timid but trusting. Judge Alden stepped out into the cold. "Under territorial law," he declared, "a child who participates in the labor and rights of a homestead family may be recognized as its heir, regardless of blood. Let the record show the ceremony is witnessed by community and court." The crowd hushed. Wade lifted the girl under the arms, steadying her hands around the long handle of the brand. She breathed in once, cheeks puffing with resolve, 1, she whispered. 2. Wade's hands closed around hers. 3. They pressed the glowing mark to the filly's hide. Not harshly, not with the violence the world had shown her, but with the gentle firmness of a future claimed rather than stolen. The hiss rose into the cold air like a promise hammered into iron. When Wade set the girl down, she leaned into him, eyes flickering with a tired, fragile pride. He wrapped his coat around her again, as if the world might still try to take her back. Judge Alden approached with a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Harlan, sign here." Wade took the pen. His hand didn't shake. He wrote his name. Beneath it, the judge added hers. The girl looked up at Wade, brows pinched. "Papa?" The word was soft, hopeful, newborn. Wade closed his eyes for a heartbeat. "I never thought I'd hear that again." "Yes, little one," he answered. "I'm right here." Snow drifted over them, quiet as blessing. And across the valley, the telegraph line hummed, a reminder that the world beyond this moment was still dangerous, still shifting, still watching. But for now, for this breath in time, a family stood, and it held.